I'm Dr. Donna Hedges. I go by Donna. I have been a nurse I tell my students I got my associate degree on the ARC, and that's why I love animals so much. But suffice it to say, nursing has been a blessing to me personally and as my career. And being able to share what little knowledge I have at times is very encouraging and exciting to me. And we have so many great speakers for our conference the next couple of days. And so I hope that you will take notes. And I also hope that you will take notes about what we can do differently next time around. Because this is an evolving thing. You know, this is not something that is a cookie cutter experience. So if something went well, tell us that. If something didn't go well, give us some suggestions on what you would like to see and some things that would be meaningful to you as an attendee at next year's conference. So I'll have you introduce yourself.
Maybe I don't know who I am.
Well, pick somebody.
Well, good morning. I was going around, everybody's on their phones. What do we do if we didn't have our phones? We'd all be miserable. But anyway, I'm Dr. Rob.
We'd all not be at the chiropractor.
Yeah.
Because if you're on Instagram or Facebook, they must have me targeted.
They do.
They give me all the exercises to stop doing this. I'm getting all shoulder exercises, back exercises, neck exercises.
Anyway.
So be careful.
Yeah. Well, I'm Dr. Robin Nelson, and like Donna said, I don't go by Donna, I go by Robin with a Y, and it's a privilege to be here with all of you, and thank you for trekking across the plains, ran into Tennessee and, various people as we were coming yesterday, and so thank you for joining us. We have, as Donna said, some amazing people that'll be speaking to you, and hopefully you'll go away, energized. This is a tough time for all of us in terms of nursing education, nursing service, but you'll make the difference. And I always tell my students, nursing is one education and 1,000 career choices. So it's a privilege for you to be here, take back and influence your colleagues that you work with. Now, I always say I'm 39, so don't forget that, right? Everybody know I'm 39, about 38 times. But anyway, I would never give up and never change the decision that I made. Now, mind you, I thought I wanted to be an elementary school teacher. Any of you just thought you wanted to be an elementary school teacher? Yeah. I changed my major instantly when I did an observation class with third graders. Now, I have to be careful because I can't say this in too many settings, but sometimes I want to tell my students, you act like third graders, but I changed my major instantly, and at that time, we didn't have a lot of choices. We were nurses, we were teachers, we were stay-at-home moms. We didn't have a lot of choices. But I've never been sorry for the decision because it has introduced me to some wonderful people, all of you included. So enjoy. And I think Maria, Dr. O'Rourke, I think she's sitting there. I can tell that she's anxious to get up here and talk to us. But please, and one thing Praveen was mentioning, and he may have told you, if there's any errors in your name on your placard, they will send it to you electronically. They can't reprint it, but they'll send it to you because you may need to turn it in to get your credit, your reimbursement, whatever. So don't hesitate. So, do we want her to come up now?
Yeah, I'll introduce her.
Well, maybe I want to introduce her. I've known her longer than you have. Now you can introduce her.
No, I'm going to put you. Now, you introduce her.
No, you go right ahead.
All right. Dr. Maria O'Rourke really does not need an introduction. She is an accomplished nurse, academic, researcher, professional, and she has such a passion for nurses understanding what professional identity is and how important that is, and how important the role of the nurse is. Her biography is in your booklet, but I just want to call attention to the fact that her body of work on professional identity and role formation within nursing has culminated in theoretically grounded practice model called role-driven practice. And that practice is the foundation for professional relationships among all members of the interdisciplinary team, from professional, technical, assistive roles, and improving practice outcomes. She has numerous academic and service positions focused on patient safety and quality care initiatives. And really the goal is to help improve patient outcomes, improve nursing care, improve nursing perspective and self-identity of how professionalism is critical, and improved outcomes all within the professional practice model. Her work has garnered numerous awards, including 2 distinguished alumni from Boston University and UCSF Alpha Eta Inaugural Leadership Hall of Fame, the Ray Cox Award by ANAC for Advancement of the Nursing Profession, and in 2026, the Daisy Lifetime Achievement Award, Living Legend. Please help me welcome Dr. Maria O'Rourke.
Yeah, they got rid of our School of Nursing. It was just one of those classic bad choices on the part of the academic community in Boston. And it was an interesting time, and I think it fits with why I speak about what I'm going to speak about today, which is revolutions. But I do want to make one correction, because I'm an interactive person, and so those of you in the back row who thought you were going to get away from me, trust me, I'll come get you if you do not speak up. But in the, on page, where's Praveen? Praveen, I really do read this. He works very hard on this. Now I know why. He's in India, and I'm in San Francisco, and I email him, and less than a half hour later, I get an email back from him. I'm not figuring that one out yet, but he's right on top of everything. But on page 3, my email says maria.o'rourke 512. It's 513, 5 for the month of May and 13 for my birthday, and in a month I will be 83. So, and what I want to know is why Robin, who's only 39, doesn't have the same color hair I have. She's hiding something. So please, this takes a lot of time and effort, a lot of good stuff in here. But if there is a mistake, please let us know. I want to share with you, I have my tools so I can move around. I don't tend to stay in one place. And Robin, if I could have a 10-minute warning, that's all I need. And then I'll make sure to wind up. All right? So when I got a phone call about the title, and I thought, gee, that's an interesting title. I wondered, I had to think about, if I'm going to do the keynote, the theme of the conference has to fit with what I'm going to say. You just don't sort of have a theme and then not have a topic that fits. And I had to think a lot about it. And I thought, well, you know what? The reason I really liked it is because one of the things you get to be when you're 83, almost, is a historian. I've been around for a lot of decades. I've seen a lot of change and transition. I've seen a lot of the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I thought, history really matters. Because if you don't know where we came from, you will never see the future the same way. You have to understand that we have stood on the backs of so many incredible nurses, all women, because at the time there really were mostly nurses that were women. And they did some extraordinary work. And I hear often things like nurses who don't know history, well, we just have to reinvent nursing. We do not need to reinvent nursing. Nursing is very clear. You just have to know what it is. And unfortunately, we have several generations of nurses who have come through schools of nursing that have taken history out of the curriculum, have taken out the work, the foundations of our profession, so that we think everything is new. Like you wake up and you have a new idea and you think, oh, I just created something. No, you didn't. Take a look at the history books and see whether or not you're just not bringing back something that somebody already said to you. We have to honor our past, and I don't think we do that. I think there are two kinds of truth, pleasant and unpleasant, and that is a very, very unpleasant truth in our history. So when you hear words like, oh, we have to start over, we have to reinvent the wheel, we have to do this, no, you don't. No, you don't. Because most, and I'm going to build this argument, but I'll say it now, every single state in the United States has jurisdictional authority over its practice called scope of practice. And if you have not read, if you have not learned, if you have not internalized every single word of your scope of practice, you are not showing up as a professional registered nurse. It's all in there. But I keep hearing, oh, we have to make it up, we have to make it up. And I say, well, did you ever read your Practice Act? No. Well, go look at that and decide whether or not we don't already have the song to sing. Maybe the song is already written. We just don't sing it well. Maybe we have to be better at the words we use. Maybe we have to stand up and talk about our powerful decision-making authority. Every single scope of practice in the United States gives you powerful, autonomous decision-making practice. You already have it. And then we talk about being powerless. The words are in there. And I'm going to tell you why the words are in there, because I helped build the words. I know they're in there. So I want us to think about the future as a way to help us know where we are in the present with a view to the future. The past is not baggage. There may be some baggage in there, but if you know it's baggage, you know what to do with it. You know, you put it in a bag and tie it up and, toss it. Because some of it is baggage. But we can't keep moaning and complaining that we don't have any power. The theme of the American Nurses Association this year, 2026, Nurses Week, is power to nursing. We can talk about the word power all we want, but if you don't know you have it, if you cannot articulate that you have it, and I don't mean stand up there and be aggressive. I'm talking about, do you have the words that give you the powerful words to use with somebody else so that they understand how powerful you really are as a professional registered nurse? Now, I never wanted to be a nurse. It was the last thing I wanted to be because I had an aunt. By the way, you're going to hear certain words. I just came back from Boston. I have a brother who's ill, and I'm taking care of him. And I was in Boston for more than a couple of days, which means I have my accent back. So there'll be words that I really have to actually think about words, or they'll come out very strange to you. So, but my aunt, who was a nurse, was everything I never wanted to be. She was loud, she was boisterous, she used to talk about patients, she used to say, make jokes. It was absolutely not me, and I didn't even know what a nurse was, but I knew it shouldn't be that. Does that make sense to you? Sometimes you don't know what it is, but you know it's not that. And I wanted to be an engineer, and I wanted to be an architect. And girls my age couldn't do that. They were not allowed in the courses where we would have prepared to go to school, and we couldn't even apply to schools of engineering or to schools of architecture. So there were three options, and I know some of you, think this is not real. There were only three options for women: teachers, elementary school, any teacher; scientist, in the sense of doing not really science, but in the science fields, but not at the scientist level; and nurses and secretaries. And that was, I still can't type. Nancy laughs at me all the time because I'm still doing this with one finger on my phone. I don't know how to do that. My thumbs don't go that way. So in the end, when I decided I would become a nurse, I was in the 9th grade. How many of you have daughters? Yeah, watch this one in the schools. The guidance counselor came into the class and said, okay, we're going to talk about, we had what's called POD, Professional and Occupational Development. And we were supposed to take a look at what we wanted our careers to be. And I want to be a nurse, okay? I think I want to be a nurse. She says, oh, that's great. So first of all, I was a straight A student in the college track. Now, those days, you literally were in the general track, the technical track, or the academic track. And they didn't cross over. I was in the academic college track. And she says to me, okay, come to my office. I'm going to take you out of the academic track, put you in the general track, because you don't need to go to college to be a nurse. I said, oh, well, but I said, I want to go to college. I mean, I'm an Italian immigrant family. I mean, you go to college like it is the Holy Grail. So it was in my literature class, Mrs. Torelli, who heard her. And we're walking out the door, leaving the class, and in those Boston snow cloakrooms, you know what a cloakroom is? You know, they literally had a place where you put all your coats. And she literally grabbed me by the scruff of the neck and throws me into the cloakroom. She says, you will not leave the college course. You can be a registered nurse in an academic setting, and you are going to college. And she turned my life around. Listen to what people are saying to people about what it means to be a nurse and how to be a nurse, and then change the conversation. It's one thing to know it, it's another thing to speak up about it. And there's pushback. I only want to be a nurse because I want to have a job. And I know nurses are now making 80,000 plus, so I want the job. There's nothing written that says that if you want to take a job, you don't have to do the work. And in this case, I don't care if you want to call it a job, but you still have to do what's in your scope of practice. But if you've never learned your scope of practice, how do you know that that's your work? You have to know what the work is before you know how to do it. So one of the things that's happening that's very exciting is I'm working with Dr. Pam Stanley, who we just are rebuilding an entire curriculum at St. Mary's College in Moraga from the ground up. It's a baccalaureate program. It's based on the theoretical model, which is role-driven practice. And every student that walks out that door is going to know their professional identity, they're going to know their professional role, and they're going to walk up with their head straight and their heads held high. That's our commitment. And it's actually not just innovation, because we're going to revolutionize the curriculum in the sense that we're going to make it stick within the jurisdictional authority. And I'm going to talk to you about why revolutions are different than innovation. You need to know that. And one of the differences is that revolutions are then grounded in jurisdictional authority. You really have the right to do it. It doesn't mean your right won't be threatened. I mean, we have jurisdictional power as a democracy called a constitution. That doesn't mean people don't try to tear it down. But you got to know you have it. And then you fight to keep it. So the notion that we have evolved and transformed in many different ways over the last 60, 70 years is a historical. It should be written as a novel. It's so beautifully written. And I'm going to try to highlight some of it so you walk out of here going, wow, what an amazing past we had. You know? One of the things, though, about the books we used to have, I still have my history book from nursing school. And for many, many years, I would never let my picture be taken. When, you know, I go to a conference and they want to post your picture, I would never let my picture be taken. And the reason was, I did not want to look like the little old ladies in the book with the blue-white hair. And I thought, that's not how I'm going to look. And then one day I was told, well, if you don't let us take your pictures, you don't get to speak. And so my vanity was trumped over my ability and desire to send a message. So I want you to relax. I want you to listen to some of the things I'm going to say today. And I will share why I think what I think. And and how I got there. And then what I'm asking of you is that you walk out here and you check out your own journey. Where did you start? Where did you come from? What were the premises and the thoughts that you had when you really entered the profession? Do you actually think it's a profession? Do you understand that we are under serious threat right now? Serious threat. And we have been every decade. This is a different one. This one's even more subversive in terms of undermining nursing, and I'll talk about that too. So we're going to talk about intentional nursing leadership. We talk about nursing leadership all the time. I want it to be intentional. It's not just leadership. It's like, what are you doing with your leadership? Where's your passion? What is the thing you want to go to your nursing deathbed saying, I fixed that, or I had something to do with that, and then leave a legacy with individuals who you've mentored and coached over the years. Okay? Dr. Stanley and Dr. Luce are my mentees. We've been together for a lot of years, and we're kind of close with Dr. Long. That's been an interesting circuitous route with us, but we always end up in the same place, which is a passion for helping people in their health, achieve health, and to help them with that recovery. It's not always about the medical diagnosis. It's what do you do when you got one? How do you get to restore your health? How do you get to feel better? How do you improve? That's what nurses do. So I'm going to take you on a little bit of a journey, but in the meantime, I'm going to start with, are there any questions? Any thoughts, statements, concerns, issues, arguments about what I just said? Anybody want to share? Yes? So the theoretical model that I developed is, first of all, it's professional role identity formation theory. And out of that theory, I built a practice model to be used in the hospital setting, which is a professional practice model, which is used in many, many magnet journeys. I'm in many of those practice models. And the actual name of the practice model is role-driven practice. Okay? So you have to have a theoretical base, then you have to figure out, well, how does it fit? And then where does it fit? And when Magnet emerged again late in the 90s. So I'm a Magnet kid because I was actually taught by Marlene Kramer in my graduate education research course, and she's the one that did the study that showed why Magnet worked. And if you haven't read the original study, you really need to read it. It's just fascinating. It's not a very big book, but she did really quite beautiful work. And she was a monster. I was terrified every time I went into her class. She was so hard. But you learned. You learned. That's Marlene, Dr. Marlene Kramer. And I have numerous publications. I don't know that if we gave a reference list out, did we? So here's the deal. Now you have my email. If you want a reference list, all you have to do is call me and I'll PDF it for you and I'll send it to you. No worries. Okay? Anybody else? Thoughts, comments, statements? Like, so what that I said what I said? Did it conjure anything up in your... Don't tell me you're still asleep. Plenty of coffee. No? Yes, Dawn.
I just think it's particularly timely, given that our profession was downgraded to a non-profession.
Mm-hmm. So I'll skip that slide then, because I'm going to talk about it now. That's not the first time. So do you understand what the issue was? The government, in its wisdom, decided that it would alter the definition of a professional degree and call nursing's professional degree a non-professional degree. Now, the reason they did that, the supposed reason that they did that, is that in order to get a loan, if you have a professional degree, you can get $200,000 in loan, but if you're in a non-profession, you only get $100,000. Well, think about the implications for nursing. We desperately need nurses, and they just took $100,000 away from us to fund programs so that we could have more nurses. Go back to 1980, nurses' heyday, right? The heyday in nursing. That was my era. And nurse practitioners, anybody in the room a nurse practitioner? Oh, good for you. So that was the era of the nurse practitioners. We were unbelievably, we were going everywhere. The doctors who always said they wanted to go to the rural areas, that wasn't true. Nurse practitioners were in rural clinics. They were all over the place. We were getting funded. We had studies. It was a beautiful time. And then in its inimitable wisdom, it started in, unfortunately, at San Francisco General, where I was working as the Director of Staff Development and Research. There was this fight between the doctors, the PNAs, and NPs and the PAs. Now, do you know why PAs were invented?
To counter NPs.
Huh?
To counter NPs.
The doctor said the nurses were too uppity, so they invented their own. Yep. And the physician assistant only does implementation of the medical treatment plan. Nurse practitioners do implementation of the medical treatment plan, and they do nurse. So you get a twofer. You get a very cost-effective person in a nurse practitioner versus a PA. But that was the struggles we had. Those were undermining struggles. So what happens is the next thing I get over my desk is that the city and county of San Francisco are going to reclassify nurse practitioners to mid-level practitioners. I went through the roof because it was undermining the profession. It was basically saying we were not an autonomous profession. It was stripping us of a lot of our autonomy by virtue of our scope of practice. And then it went statewide, and thanks for the American Nurses Association California and the Association of California Nurse Leaders, we killed it. It never went, they were never reclassified. But you have to stand up and know that you have to lay in front of the bus sometimes. Kim?
You know, I just wanted to add to that. The physicians will take that stance when it comes to revenue-producing patients.
There you go.
But when you're dealing with the high-cost, low-revenue patients, they don't mind giving those to the nurse practitioner.
There you go.
You can take care of them then. You have, the ability to do complex care then. But when it comes to the other patients that pay, you're not qualified.
Right. So the example I'm using is that we've had the same threat before, just in a little different way. Reclassification of NPs, now reclassification of our professional degree so we can't get money. It's all very underneath the surface. You've got to read the fine print. And if you know history, you can see it sooner than later. You can see it sooner than later. So keep all of those thoughts in mind. Anybody else have a thought you want to emerge? Anybody just challenged by that? Yes.
I'm newer, definitely not been around as long. But what I can really appreciate is where I actually teach, because we teach in Louisville, Kentucky.
Ah.
They are classified as
All the way from
mid-levels.
Kentucky, good girl.
So we actually, when I educate my students about being mid-level physician and where they stand as far as MPs go, knowing the history that's kind of how that came about, that can actually change pretty much everything of how I say things.
Yes.
So I do appreciate that. And it's interesting how when you're saying these things, I'm like, ooh, I say that in my class. I say that in my class. So I'm like, I'm just excited. So.
Well, thank you. I love validating. So everybody in this room knows a lot. You just know. And many times when I do a presentation, it's validating it. And sometimes you need to get validated. I need to get validated. Like, did I really screw up or did I not? So what I'm expecting is that some things will be new, or it'll be just said slightly differently, that it turns your own little thinking around about how to present it differently, which is why you're here. That's what learning is all about. I don't want this to be, words. I want to try to give some life to it. And take everything that I've said and talk to your students. Talk to your colleagues. The students will listen. Colleagues sometimes that don't want to listen. That's the harder part. I'm too busy, I got to do this, and this, and the doing and the tasks are killing us. We're not taskmasters. In fact, I have a colleague who is heavy into AI, and she's not a nurse. her comment to me one day was, you know what, everybody's so afraid of AI. The only people that have to be afraid of AI are task-based people. And I was like, oh my gosh. You know, I knew that, but I didn't know that that was happening outside of nursing, because we talk a lot about task orientation. And she said, oh yeah, the jobs of which are really just task-oriented, those AI is going to sweep those up. It's the thinking jobs. It's the jobs that take a head and a brain and a mind and a critical reasoning and thinking to execute. That's us. That's what we are actually empowered to do with our practice acts. We've just got to do it. And I'll say one more thing before I dive into this PowerPoint that I spent a lot of time on. Nursing, let me say, how do I say this? Have any of you read Joanne Ashley's book, The Paternalism and the Role of the Nurse? Okay, you need to find the book. And it's a hen tooth, but I went to another conference where I did another keynote, and somebody looked it up, and you can find it, but you got to really hunt for it. So paternalism in the hospitals, paternalism and the role of the nurse. Her work clearly demonstrated that we gave nursing away to the hospitals when we became employees. The day we became an employee, we lost a significant amount of our authority to work, because you work for the hospital. It's like you work for a company. They own you. We're called employed professionals. And that gives us a bit of a better base, because it at least puts the word profession in there. And when that happened, around the 50s, actually I was alive, which is hard to believe, that it was the worst thing that happened, because prior to that, nurses were entrepreneurs. My mother-in-law was an entrepreneur. She was a private duty nurse. She had her own clients. She had her own business. Nurses didn't work in hospitals for someone. They worked directly with patients. And the good news for me is, as an entrepreneur, I have my own business. The only person I have to account for is myself. And then you have to say, well, why did I do entrepreneurial work? Well, because I got fired from my C&O job when I wouldn't lay off all my nurses in 1990 when the suits came in and said, the only way we can reduce costs is get rid of 50% of your nursing staff. And I said, screw you, I'm not doing it. 24 hours later, I was right out the front door, and I went home and I said to my family, I had a 10-year-old and a 15-year-old and husband, I said, look, I'm going to get fired in every C&O job I go to. There is no place I can go now that I'm not going to get fired, because I'm never going to lay the nurses off. That's not where the problem is. So I started my own company. But remember, my true love was wanting to be what? An architect and an engineer. So I engineered a theoretical model, and I build professional practice models in facilities that want professional practice. So I'm living my dream. I'm just living, the content is nursing, but the work I want to do is within the profession. So I want you to really think about your careers. You need to know where you're going and why you're going there, and make the right choices. Sometimes you'll make a bad choice. You won't say, why did I ever do this? You can always back out of it. You can always do something else. You can always change. It's there for the taking if you choose to do it. Okay? But you need to know why. You need to know what you're doing, because you need to know why you get up in the morning. Because sometimes it's really hard to get up. Very hard. So, long and short of it is, revolutions are important, and intentional leadership is critical. Know why you're leading, and values. There is no revolution that hasn't been values-based, something very core that had to be dealt with. And one person, these strong nurses, went out and fought for it and made it happen. So I'm going to share with you some of my colleagues and mentors and mentees have tagged are my Maria-isms. These are things I say all the time, so if somebody says, well, let's call them Maria-isms. By the way, I do have a website, free, get on it. I have articles on it. I have a learning module on it that's free and complimentary. Please, I spent a lot of time building that so I could have, distribute the message more. Doesn't cost you anything, so look it up. I have cards if you, I can't ever remember anything without a card, so if you need a card, I can give it to you. But learning without behavior change is irrelevant, so if you sit here all day and don't learn anything, shame on you. That's not my problem, because you're not learning. Secondly, the only behavior you can change is your own. How many of you are parents? Yeah, try this one on your kids, because you cannot change their behavior. You can change your behavior. Third, accountability is a professional role obligation. I hear people, well, they did it. No, you have to own what you did and then move forward with that. You can only hold yourself accountable, not others, and those two go together, because if you don't think that accountability is a role obligation, you can't be in a profession and not be accountable for your decisions. It's a societal value, but it's also a societal rule that that's what you do, that you will do no harm and you will hold yourself accountable for your decisions. You can't change outcomes until you change practice, and you can't change practice until you know what to do when you show up in the morning. And this is an important one. So if your practice is broken, if your practice is task-based, you walk in a room and you do all the things on the list, but you're not listening. You'll hear more about listening from Dr. Luce. If you don't understand that you're supposed to be looking at the whole room and figuring out whether or not there's something in the environment, like a husband who is very angry in the corner and the wife is cowering in the bed and you don't think there's some problem going on in that relationship, you miss that one, and then you find out that he's an abuser. Or, more than that, you get punched in the face. Workplace violence, because you're not reading the room. You need to know how many of you are psych nurses? There you go. We need more psych nurses in here. Dr. Stanley calls it, own the door. You need to know when the hell to get out of a room. You have to, that's not just basic, that's like psychiatric nurses know when to move and get out of the room. You have to know how to read what's in the room. And we've eliminated psychiatric nursing from curriculums. Now, I'm not saying you have to go into a locked ward, but you ought to be learning nonverbal behavior. You ought to be learning how to read the room. And we've taken that out of the curriculum. So now we have focused on the physiology and not the psychosocial. And yet, half of our work is all psychosocial. Helping somebody recover is a psychosocial concept. And recovery is one of our most sacred concepts. It's not about chronic illness. It's about helping somebody get from point A to point B after they've had a terrible car accident or a stroke or whatever it is that person has had. So keep these in mind. You'll see them float throughout the presentation. We are under threat. I've already talked about this. My biggest concern is that there's this not me attitude. Well, it's not really going to happen to me, in my hospital, on my unit, but it is going to happen to the profession. And we have to look to protecting and building the profession, not just the job. Not just the job. The only way, though, I think we can weather this storm to really advance not only the discipline, because we have this whole anti-intellectual vent right now. You don't need to know everything, just do it. On Friday, I'm going to do the end note. We're going to talk about how are we going to deal with anti-intellectualism and how do we try to strengthen professional governance as one of the only solutions to keep employed professionals who do not have jurisdictional authority over control of practice in their institutions, even though you think you do. How are we going to make that different? How are we going to make that different? Did that make sense to you? Okay. So one of the things we have to do is stay true to our values, and I'm going to talk about values because those values, which are part of the A&A platform, you need to know them and you know which one are yours. There's two of them that drove me to be where I am today. You have to send a clear message that we're powerful decision makers. We are not just follow doctor orders. That is still such a horrible theme amongst nurses. Well, my major work is to make sure that I get what the doctor wants done. No, that is part of your work, but that's not all of your work. And we have to strive for jurisdictional authority to gain control of practice. We have jurisdictional authority with your legal scope of practice. We did have jurisdictional authority over control of practice, and we let that one go, and I'm going to explain to you how that happened. And we have to lead the way everywhere, because we're RNs, and every place we go, we are leaders. Why are we leaders? Because in a profession, you were given powerful decision-making authority. If you have powerful decision-making authority, you have to lead your decisions and be accountable for them. And if you're not going to be accountable for them, then the society says, then you don't have the right to be able to make decisions about me. Does that make sense? You see how I get where I'm going? All right. So, but we need to know the difference between revolution, innovation, and jurisdictional authority. We need all of them. It's not one better than the other. They just do different things. So, revolutions transform. They're not about improvement. It's not about better ideas. It's about reclaiming authority. It's you get to actually own it. I hope that's off. It's about who has the authority. It has to define the who controls it, and who is accountable. It requires professional role identity. Now I want to take a minute here. I do not talk about professional identity. Professional identity is like this amorphous cloud. It's like, oh, I love being a nurse. And I'm saying, do you love being a nurse when you know what the work is? Or is it just this idea? So I'm asking you to convert your words to professional role identity, because identity needs a structure. Our structure is the professions and scope of practice. So professional, yes, I understand what a professional is. I understand my role by scope of practice, and I identify with both of them. It's not rhetoric, it's real. That's what I hope you talk to your students about. Because this fuzzy, oh, I love being a nurse. Yeah, but you love being a nurse when things aren't going right? It's not identity is not a feeling state. It's not an emotion. It's a structure inside you that says, this is who I am and this is why I want to be this. You have to establish jurisdictional authority as the right to say what the work is. We get the right to say what the work is. Why? Because we have a scope of practice, because that's where the work is defined. I get very concerned when somebody says, oh, we made up nurse-sensitive indicators. No, you didn't. The nurse-sensitive indicators are in your Practice Act, and that's why they're nurse-sensitive, is because they're in our Practice Act. Prevention and protection are in the Practice Act. Those are the concepts. So falls prevention is a Practice Act issue. We have the legal authority to make sure we protect our patients. But when we don't talk about it from that perspective, it's like foo-foo talk. Oh, well, of course everybody doesn't want anybody to fall. Well, yeah, I understand that, but I have a legal obligation to make sure it doesn't happen. Which, by the way, is why the chief nurse in an organization is a registered nurse. Because they are the ones who are supposed to be implementing the scope of practice in their organization through policy and procedure. And if your job description doesn't say on the first line, on the very first line, follows all rules and regulations and statutes related to scope of practice, your CNO has failed you in ensuring that you don't become a task-oriented job person. That has to be the first statement on every job description. I was in a conversation with leaders and a faculty member, PhD prepared faculty member, who said, oh, by the way, we don't teach it anymore because scope of practice is optional. When did your legal license become, do you think your driver's license is optional? How do you even get there? But that's what we have to stop. There was the conversation, excuse me. That's when I put Pam in the room. So, revolutions produce role authority, okay? And innovation produces informed practice. Dr. Luce has done an amazing job at her research around listening, about how that informs our practice about doing the very work that we're supposed to be doing, which is not just sitting in a chair and sitting there and listening, but to actually engage as a result of the listening. Stop me anywhere you want if there's something you want me to clarify. Do not sit there and just let it go over your head, okay? So, practice improvement is what innovation does. We have a lot of innovation. Nurses have been doing innovation over and over and over again, but the people who got to sell and make money on the innovation was not the nurse. Now that has to change. If you have an innovation and there is a company that's in your organization that somehow loves your idea, you need to be really clear that's your idea and make sure you negotiate how they're going to use your idea. Now, because you're an employed professional, the hospital actually owns your idea. It's like when you go to a company and you work for a company and you do something creative, they own that work. That's just standard practice. So there's a bit of a complication, but you can still hold your own and make sure that they understand that's your idea and that they're earning a living off of your idea. Okay? So it's knowledge, application, and improvement. It's efficiency and techniques. And each and every one of you are involved in some sort of an innovation. So I'm hoping that today what's going to happen is that some of the words I'm using, they're going to sort of trigger your own thinking about how you might use what I'm saying today to further your innovation. Because some innovations actually can lead, not all, but some can lead to jurisdictional authority. It depends on how you look at it. And if you have jurisdictional authority, then we own it. If you don't have it, then it's borrowed. And we have a lot of borrowed stuff. Revolutions secure jurisdictional authority. It's not incremental. Without revolutions, innovation lacks control of practice. Somebody can take it away from you because you don't control it. We can argue very clearly why falls is part of nursing practice, because you can go to your Practice Act and see the word in the legal definition. It's right there for you. Somebody can say, well, you're not really decision makers. Well, in California, you can go to Section 4 of the Nursing Practice Act and say, no, I really am, because you see, here are the words right now. It's in the scope of practice. You have to use your scope of practice for jurisdictional authority, because right now that's all we have. That's all we have. Back. So jurisdictional power means you literally know that we own it, control it, have it part of our clinical decision making. There's no question about it, and that governance for practice is a professional obligation. We are required to control our practice. Why? Because we have powerful decision-making authority. If you have powerful decision-making authority, you make sure that your practice, what you are doing to somebody, doesn't hurt them. You have to control it. Now, how do we control it in nursing? We'd have scope of practice, standards, code of ethics. All of those things help to keep us on track. But right now, when you talk about, we cannot share our governance, which is why the term shared governance never fit. You can have shared leadership. You can have shared leadership. I mean, I have control of my practice, you have control of your practice, and we can lead together, no problem with that. But you don't have anything, if you are not a registered nurse, you have no right to tell me about my practice. You can tell me the consequences of my practice. You can say, look, you're using that standard, but look at the outcome. You can inform me, but I have to be controlled. I have to control that practice. So jurisdictional means that you define and control the practice. We own it. Okay, keep that in mind, because we have very little of that. Very little of that. Then, intentional leaders, and I'm talking about, you'll see that I transitioned out of the word leadership to leaders. I hardly ever use the word leadership because I think it's too fuzzy. I want you to know that each and every one of you is a leader, and every student is a leader. They're a leader of their education. We have to instill in each and every person that we come in contact with that they are accountable for speaking up. They need to lead the effort of what they're doing, whatever that is. We have to look at, how many of you in the room are senior leaders? One, okay. So this is where, when we're looking at policy, how do we ensure that it's not, somebody can't take it away from us? So if we're going to create a policy on protecting the patient, right? Falls prevention. First statement, Practice Act says, now we own it. And now what we're doing is creating in the workplace a policy and a procedure to make that happen. But the nurses need to know that they own the responsibility. They can't go in there and say, oh, I kind of forgot to put the rails up. That doesn't work. Oh, I thought somebody else was going to do it. Or. We have to understand and put, wherever there's jurisdictional authority, you stick it up front and make sure everybody knows what it is. That's going to be great for students. Okay? And we want to change it so that it's structurally protected, either in the law, the policy, or governance. And when you look at the history that I'm going to share with you, you'll see how some of this, came up. And some revolutions were better at jurisdictional authority than others, but they were all aiming for that. So the focus today is the why. Why do we have to have values-driven revolutions and innovation? Because we promise to do no harm. We need to be better at doing what we're doing. And let me give you an example, a fun example, I hope. A friend of mine, and this is right tissue paper, right from this little book. Mom was a nurse. She's passed away. She and my mother-in-law were best friends. And this is their technology. This is their notebook. This was technology in 1940. I guarantee you, maybe if we had a whole nother few hours, I'd have this conversation, that there is more in this little book that you will learn about your patient than you will learn on the electronic medical record. And I happen to be very aware of that because I have a brother who's very ill and ailing. I have a husband who is the same, and every time I get an after-visit summary, I have no clue what the nurses did. There's no record of nursing. And we are in deep, deep trouble if we cannot have a historical record of the impact of our practice on outcomes. Because someone's going to say, well, we don't know that just because you said you did it didn't mean you did it. The electronic health record has usurped nursing's ability to truly document what nurses actually do for patients. But I thought this was incredible. I read this and I thought, oh my God, there's so much in here about the patient nursing practice. So that's the technology that the innovation went from this to the electronic health record, and sometimes innovation isn't all that good in some arenas. So, by the way, it even smells old. It's just this, I think this is a treasure, a true treasure. So, ANA decided that this year is going to be the power of the nurse. It's relevant for both revolutions and innovation. And we will be challenged to our legitimacy based on everything I've already said. So what are we going to do about it? Well, professional role clarity, being able to articulate who we are as a professional, who we are as a nurse. By the way, you're a professional first. You choose to want to be an autonomous decision-making person, and you chose nursing to do the work. Okay, we do not teach it well enough. We teach it all like mixed together, and then we teach skills and tasks. I'm saying you got to shift that over. They need to know why they're going to show up, which is I want to be a professional decision maker with independent authority, autonomous decision making. I'm able to do, base my work on science. And yes, science is important, and you cannot be in a profession and be anti-intellectual. You just can't be, because it's a criterion for being in a profession. And then, oh, I decided I wanted to do it in nursing. Well, I could have been an architect. I wanted to be a professional. But I could have been an architect, I could have been a pharmacist, I could have been a whole bunch of other disciplines. When I teach in a professional practice, I teach everybody about the profession, and then I split the group up into their particular discipline, nurses over here, pharmacists here, doctors here, whatever, and I have them do a deep dive into their profession, and then they educate the rest of us. The only group that never knew how to talk about their own profession with the nurses, which is why they hired me to go in and teach the nurses scope of practice. That is killing us. That's killing us. And it's not in the schools. And I know it's not in the schools because I was at a directors and academic directors meeting with over 150 schools in a room, and I asked the question with the Board of Registered Nurses at the back, how many of you teach to scope of practice? And 2 hands went up, and they were the 2 schools of nursing that I work with. And the Board of Registered Nurses went white at the thought that they were not even bringing in the scope of practice into student education. So how do you expect them when you hire them? How do you expect them? That's the first question you should hire when you do hiring. Think about anybody you hire. Do you know your scope of practice? And if the answer is no, you need to have a different conversation. Have to have a different conversation. Yes?
I have a comment and a question. When I was in nursing school, I remember, I don't know if it was a nursing instructor, but she had said, when doctors go to medical school, they rev them up, and you guys are the best of the best, you're here, you're so smart, you're genius. And when we send them to nursing school, we're like, you're lucky to be here, look to your right, look to your left. One of you's not going to be here.
Oh my, well,
beat them down, right?
absolutely, yeah.
And so then we send these doctors who have this huge ego into the hospital, and we send these nurses who are like, I'm so lucky that I made it through and didn't die. And then we expect nurses to be able to stand up to these doctors and say, that's not in my professional practice.
Well,
how do we fix that as nursing leaders to say, that physician,
okay,
yes.
stop for a second. Use the word I. Now that I know that, how am I going to do something about it? You've got to turn your thoughts into I statements. You are the only behavior you can change. What can you do about that? Who can you call? You're an alum. Clearly you're an alum.
Yeah.
Call the school and say, I want to have a conversation about whether or not you're teaching to scope of practice in this school. We're going to teach it from the day they walk in the door. They have to be taught it from the day they walk in the door. You can take control of that answer. Okay? I want to know about it. You have my email. Okay. We have to make it known that we're in every setting. The fact that we can do nursing practice anywhere is our power. If we show up being role clear, if we know how to articulate why we're there and what our decision-making authority looks like. We stand shoulder to shoulder with other disciplines, not because we're nurses. We stand shoulder to shoulder because we're all professionals. I control my practice as a nurse, but I stand shoulder to shoulder with a doctor, with a pharmacist, with any of them, because I have the same responsibilities as a professional to be science-driven, to make sure that you transfer information, to make sure that you protect the public interest no matter what you do, and that you are a powerful decision maker. That's why we stand shoulder to shoulder. They don't care about nursing. They think, well, that's your job. That's your part. We have to internalize that staying in the game is a professional obligation. We give up opportunity. It is a professional obligation to stay in the game to make sure that patients have no harm. That's a professional obligation, and as nurses, we must do that. And we have to broadcast our professional work. We have to, I was trying to think of a good word when I was doing this, and I thought, broadcast. We've got to tell everybody that we are powerful decision makers who have authority, and it's built on values and ethics. I know we talk about trust, everybody trusts us. I question that. I don't trust every nurse I've seen. I'm sorry about that. I'm telling you right now. There isn't a hospital that I walked out of that I haven't found somebody I didn't trust. So we have to think about how we're being perceived. I would rather they say things like, they trust that we're going to make decisions in their best interest. That's a different story. It's a different set of words. I trust that you're going to hunt down that doctor when I need him. I trust. It's not a feeling state. It's not a feeling state. So values, professions are always values driven, otherwise you can't be a profession. But values is not a thing, it's a way to be. You either value something or you don't. And if you don't value that nursing is more than a task orientation and get yourself out the door, I think everybody should go home when they have to go home. But that means that when you're there, you should be exercising the full scope of your practice at that moment, because that's what I'm paying you for. The ANA values, and then naming them is not enough. I know that some of you could probably spout off all of the different ones, but they have to be internalized. And I'm going to tell you my story to help you see how you can internalize yours. ANA values, do you know that several of them are probably your driving force? And that's how you start. That's how you gain power in the room. You say, I want to tell you about why I do what I do. And that usually starts capturing people's thinking, well, that'll be interesting. What do you do? Why do you do that? Okay? Just giving you a hint about how you might present differently. So, here they are. Human dignity, respect inherent worth of every person, deliver holistic individualized care. So how do you deal with racism in nursing if that's true? Think about it. This is respect inherent worth of every person. One of my very first assignments, standing at the nurse's station, getting my assignment from the head nurse. And one of the senior nurses says to the head nurse, remember, I don't do women. Yeah. Now, do you think that's bias? Do you think that, because they only wanted male patients, that's all they want to take care of? They wouldn't take care of the women. And they went along with it. I mean, I learned a big lesson from that one right off the bat. Commitment to patient. Primary duty is to those served, not the system, not efficiency, and not self-interest. That's a tough one. Advocacy, protect safety, rights, and well-being. We have a practice act that tells us to do that, and we speak up against unsafe and unjust systems. But, who's going to speak up under unpleasant truth if they think they're going to get fired because they don't have the backing of their own? You know that I know that you know that when there is a team of nurses and you are the outlier who's trying to make inroads into using standards of practice a little differently so we can get better outcomes, you get pushback. And sometimes you get bullied. And we have to figure out a way to stop that. We can't allow that. That's where the student nurses are getting killed. Things like, well, we don't do that like here. Pam, Dr. Stanley, very clear. Well, we don't do that stuff here. Yes, except that's the standard. Yeah, I know, but we do a little workaround to that. Everybody thought nursing doing workarounds was a great idea. Well, to a certain extent, we had to, but it was a circumvention of the very standard we were trying to support, which is be forthright and do the right thing at the right time for the right person with the right reason. Accountability, own decisions and outcomes. A lot of backsliding. Professional autonomy is expected. I hear nurses say, well, I didn't become a nurse to be a decision maker. I came here to help the doctor implement the medical treatment plan. I said, well, then you're not a nurse. Those are the kinds of statements. You can't be a nurse. That's like you're only doing half your practice, which means maybe we should cut your salary in half. If you're only doing half the practice, then maybe you shouldn't be getting a full salary because you don't have to work. Integrity, consistent alignment of actions, ethical principles, professional standards, moral commitments, be honest, accountable, transparent. That's a yes and no and a maybe. Social justice, which is mine. Address inequities, biases, discriminations. You can't grow up in the 50s and 60s and not have social justice be your core. Promoting inclusion and access. This is my strongest tether. Collaboration. This is something that Britt's going to talk about, because collaboration is fantastic, but you got to know what to collaborate about. You can't collaborate and give away your soul. So if you're not role clear, and you don't know how to articulate your role, and you're in a situation in which you have to collaborate, how do you hold your own? And I don't mean be obstinate. I'm just saying, how do you own your own and say, well, no, that is not what a nurse is. So therefore, we have to, let me educate you about what a nurse is, and then we can collaborate on that. Professional authority was the second one. I mentioned earlier, I come from a Southern Italian, Sicilian family. Patriarch was alive and well and was living at the kitchen table. I learned it very early on when my brother got to do things that I couldn't do, about that was not okay with me. So through the years, part of my work has been to ensure professional authority, which is why the scope of practice and why all the things we've been talking about today. So social justice requires activism. So if we're really going to do a revolution, you have to see yourself as an activist. Advocacy really has to do with innovation. I've been advocating for a lot of innovation over the years, but I've been an activist, so I'm both. I've been an activist at creating jurisdictional authority through scope of practice. You need to know who you are. You need to know who you are. So who are these people that I've been talking about? Well, we all know Flo, and basically she started this process. She sort of dug the groundwork around nursing. And despite the fact that there is new evidence that she was very biased in her belief about who had worth and who didn't have worth, putting that aside for a moment, she did truly elevate nursing beyond the domestic work or church work. Lavinia was like a powerhouse. She led the self-governance struggle. She helped claim authority. She actually changed standards and regulations. Nutting was another one who moved education out into the universities. She was the one who got it there. These were hard times. Women were not, look at the years up here, women were not seen as valued in education at all. So these were powerful changes. And then we had jurisdiction, people who dealt with jurisdiction. I'm a Virginia Henderson person. That's how I got raised, through Virginia. These people were actually alive when I was going to school. I actually met them all. But Henderson really defined the difference between independent and dependent. See, we teach the dependent, but we don't teach the independent well. We teach them how to do the skills and tasks related to implementing disease processes and medical treatment plans, but what's the other side to that? The nursing practice that goes toward actually healing. Faye Abdullah, amazing woman, big, amazing woman, reframed care by linking patient problems and nursing judgment. It was the very beginning of the clinical reasoning, critical thinking phase, and she revolutionized the idea in scopes of practice related to not having simple obedience. I love the word obedience, I haven't used that word. Obedience to physician orders. And then Imogene King promoted goal-directed systems so that we could figure out how to do our nursing and be accountable for our decision-making within organizations. Then Dorothy Oram classified nursing as a unique domain. She was the one who revolutionized the way in which, and again, in scopes of practice, to show us that nursing was just not this nebulous bunch of tasks, but that we had to be theoretically focused on what did patients who have chronic illness need? Did they need self-care? What was the theory behind the work we were doing? Martha Rogers, who everybody thought was a Looney Tune, said that we were a distinct science, and she was right. And all of the stuff that she came up with, people are now using Roger's work to really identify how the true cosmos is working and how it's not working. It's an amazing tribute that she was thinking that way, way before we were even born. So these 8 theorists did more than publish their ideas. They actually redrew boundaries in nursing. They spread the boundaries out. They created the regulation. They gave us a footing. And then, 1966, I show up. This is when San Francisco, actually 3,000 nurses walked out on their jobs because we didn't have control of practice, and the newspaper said it was all about money, and the answer was, no, it was not. And I brought with me for you to see, to make you understand that it was really, really, really real. This was the report. I think I may have the only copy. We're still looking for archives for our work, Dr. Stanley. And in that period of time, not only did we rewrite the scope of practice, but we instituted the origin of professional governance. The Professional Performance Committee in 1966 was contractually obligated by the hospital to allow nurses to control their practice. We had jurisdictional authority over the governance of practice, and then it got eroded and transformed into shared governance, which took us totally off track. And now we tried to come back with shared leadership. And I can only tell you, how many of you are magnet hospitals? Okay, in a magnet hospital, you can't keep your magnet status, without governance. Even if it's not working, you just keep it on the books. But in non-magnet hospitals, there's no reason to have professional governance. They don't care about this. Now, maybe some of them do, but under financial burden, guess what's going to go? Anything that's not revenue producing. Anything that's not revenue producing is going to go out the window, including the nurses. And if you don't think that one's coming, the suits are back. The suits were here in the 90s, and the suits are back. It's a very business, labor reduction mentality. Get as much money that isn't revenue producing off the books, and then cut labor. So, do we have threats? Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you. So then Gene Ross shows up and says, "Hey, we need to control how many nurses we have," and that's when the beginning of looking at staffing, and partly due to the RIFs. Partly due to the suits coming in and saying, you only need 2 nurses, and then the rest of them are techs. And we figured you couldn't do the work. Our outcomes went right into the toilet because we did not have enough decision-making authority and clinical reasoning and critical thinking to help us with the patient population. And then where we are, I shared today, is I developed professional identity formation theory, emphasizing role-driven accountability. You need to know what you're accountable for, and then that needs to drive you, rather than tax execution, and then advanced jurisdictional authority within scope of practice. The good news is that if you are in California, the California Nursing Practice, which was signed into law in 1974, is probably the clearest articulation about the professional role of a registered nurse. So if you read that Practice Act, just look it up on the BRN, you'll get a feel for how that was constructed, and then go look at your own Practice Act and try to figure out, gee, how can I say this better so that I can articulate my own Practice Act on the core concepts that I'm presenting today. So, key messages: control the practice. Revolutions are not about self-interest. They're not supposed to do the profession, they're supposed to help somebody else. And in 1966, we had it. My biggest concern, and I'm going to talk a lot more about this on Friday, is the anti-intellectual event in nursing. We don't need science. The reason we had no control is because nobody could talk about what a nurse was. So we had all of these mindsets, anti-intellectualism, task and skill versus professional role, job mentality. It's only a job, you know, and we couldn't sing the song of professional nursing. And that stirred the pot to get what was going on in '66 on the books. And you know who helped do it? Canadian nurses. Anybody Canadian nurse in here? I worship the ground they walk on. They are an amazing group of nurses, and they are all professional role driven. So we have rejected, we have to reject. This is our biggest threat right now. This will make us automatons if we reject science. And nurses are not just doing it, everybody's doing it. The whole nation is doing it. Just think vaccines. The knowledge, so anti-intellectualism really just means it's devalued professional authority which cannot be sustained. So we'll address this more later. Where we are now, all of this I've talked about is as our history, this is how we are and where we got right now. I think that magnet designation is not a revolution, it's an improvement in practice. Evidence-based, and DNPs are there for improving the practice, but they don't, it's not a revolution. The revolutions really, that only 3, was the practice control in '66, NANDA, which is under threat right now, and advanced practice prescriptive authority, but because it was only for nurse practitioners, it wasn't broad enough. We should have broadened that, but everybody went, no, we want to be our own profession. Nurse practitioners don't have their own profession. Registered nurses are in the registered nurse, the nursing profession, and they have a role called nurse practitioner. They are not a separate and independent practice. So, NANDA is under threat. We'll talk more about this on Friday. This is our biggest hidden threat. Keep this in mind. I've just gone over this enough. So what does intentional leadership have to do? We have to be in the right places at the right time, doing the right work in front of the right people, and take control of our profession. We have to stand up. We have to be articulate. We have to know that values drive our identity. Identity drives role clarity. That drives power. That drives influence. That drives system change. There's an algorithm. There's an algorithm. We have to make certain that nurses know that they make decisions in every venue. Every venue. They have to be at the table. So in closing, historical evidence demonstrates professional role identity is never fully realized through just education and socialization. It has to be grounded in and congruent with structures, like the legal structure or policy structure or contracts. Nurses are afraid of contracts. And that's why I want you to read Hospital's Paternalism and the Role of the Nurse, because if we'd been smart enough then to organize ourselves to be contractual in our relationship with the organization, we wouldn't be where we are today as a dependent profession within the hospital system. We lost our opportunity, true opportunity, to have jurisdictional authority over the profession when the staffing agencies turned a blind eye, because they went to how many numbers of people do you need to staff, not how do we contract for all the staffing in your facility and we'll manage the control of practice, just contract, we'll do it all. But they didn't. They did it incrementally. They were innovating sort of the staffing models, but the old staffing models, how many numbers of people do you need at the bedside? Versus saying, I'm the owner of this company, I'm a registered nurse, I'm going to contract with you, just like with doctors. You contract with the hospital and say, we're in charge of making sure that you are staffed by the right people, and own it, and then have a contract with the facility. We lost that opportunity. It was one of my darkest days. I remember talking at a meeting with several of them, and they said, well, there's just not enough margin to do that. It was all about money. It's all about money. In the absence of such authority, professional identity remains aspirational. That's why I want you to stop talking about professional identity and talk about professional role identity. It's who you are, what you do, and why you do what you do. Thank you. We'll have time during the panel for there to be some opportunity. My clock says I have 2 minutes.
We have 7 minutes before the next presentation, so we have 5 minutes for questions and discussion.
All right, talk to me. So what that you just heard all this stuff? What difference does it make? What did you learn? Go read your practice act. Tape it on the front of your door. What else?
One of the concerns that I have is, so I'm at nursing now for over 42 years, and we have always been an oppressed profession in terms of those above us dictating downward and us not having that professional identity. What I'm concerned about is if we don't begin in foundational courses having students understand professionalism and professional identity and role clarity, we are going to go back to the days when we were handmaidens and handmen. I don't want to exclude anybody, to the doctors. And what I find is I've taught in 4 different institutions. In the beginning, we're really good about talking about the history and about Florence Nightingale and all that kind of stuff, because you do have to have an understanding of the basis of what nursing's about. But then we launch into all the nursey things, and I don't think we do an adequate job of talking about role identity, role clarity, professional identity.
It has to be baseline. If the students don't learn it in school, where are they going to learn it? Because there's too much practice variation in the hospitals. The variation is outrageous. Even though we have standards and academics we're all supposed to follow, it doesn't really happen that way. So the students, and the students get buffered by, well, we don't do it that way. So somewhere along the line, there has to be somebody that stands up. Now, I have an issue with the oppression issue. I think that if you believe you are oppressed, if that is what drives you, then that's how you show up. And I'm saying, I choose not to be oppressed. I choose to be who I am with my values and my ethics, and I want to articulate and have a conversation with you so that we can do the right thing at the right moment for the right person. If you show up as, if you frame your life as, my work as a nurse is to follow doctor's orders, that's how you show up. If my work is to only pay attention to the tasks, that's how I show up. There's no give and take around that, because that's how you show up. That's what you believe. So you have to change. You have to be more role clear. You have to believe that you're not oppressed and that you will stand up for a patient for whatever reason. I think one of the things that we have dealt with, though, is women in general and women today are being marginalized again. We're losing our rights. We are back to being barefoot and pregnant. Educated women are being pitted against women who didn't go to college. I mean, all of this stuff, this is like not new, ladies and gentlemen. I lived this in the 50s and the 60s. So it's a return to the demonization of women. And despite the fact, and with all due respect to the men in the room, we're still a predominantly female, population. But what I expect of the men, whether in nursing or out of nursing, is to stand up beside us and say, hey, stop talking about it that way. That's not true about women. But we are now going back, and I think that is going to come back to haunt us around nursing education if we don't deal with it directly in the schools. We have to take on this issue because it's now become a societal issue. Yes?
I was just in a pre-conference this morning in a nursing clinical, and I was getting some feedback on a clinical site that was struggling a little bit, and I was going around the room, and the first student, I said, all right, let's start over here, and she says, you don't want to start with me. And I said, why? And she's like, well, because I saw some things that I didn't like. And I'm like, okay, well, I do want to start with you then, because I need to hear your voice and you need to speak up.
There you go.
And I'm like, I want to empower you guys to
Right.
see something wrong and have the ability and the confidence to say something to fix it, because that's how you advocate for your patients.
Yep.
I'm like, so I don't want to hear you say that your observation of something negative that's negatively impacting a patient and your learning experience is something that I don't want to hear.
And
I
it's
don't-
not valid and
and
reliable
it's not
data.
valid. I don't want to hear that again. I'm like, what I want to hear is, I have an observation, I would love to hear your thoughts. I'm like, and that's what I want you to say for the rest of forever.
And I would simply add, I have an observation that has reliable data, because I looked at it, this is what I saw, and we could check out whether it is reliable data or not. Listen to me and listen to my story, and if you're spot on, then that's the conversation. Good one.
Absolutely.
That's a great turnaround. That's a great turnaround. Yes, sir.
I just wanted to thank you for your perspective on our colleague's question. I don't know your name, I'm sorry. And it's a very important topic for me, because when I was going through nursing school, I experienced a little bit of that, but not as bad as I've heard it was. But we know, I'm a college professor, and so it's very disheartening for me to see students feel that way.
Yeah.
And I try to make sure that each student that I have, I pass that information to them, just the way you said it. And I'm just glad, and I felt very good when you were giving her that information, because it starts with you. It really starts with you. If you don't believe it, then
Right.
you will pass that on. I did not believe the nurses eat their young mantra.
Right.
And I never passed it on. And all the students that I've been, churning out, they do not have that mantra. So I believe that if each
Right.
person takes responsibility, that over time, the culture will change. It's something that was handed over to us. And we accepted it, and we just kept to
Right.
it.
Just remember, you show up how you think. You talk how you think. So if you think in negativity, you speak in negativity, and you behave in negativity. The only behavior you can change is your own. You think it up differently, and your behavior will change. You have to change how you think about something before you can change your behavior. And if you change your behavior, then the person you're interacting with has to respond to that. And that's what you're doing. Thank you very much. By the way, I did something that I don't usually do. When I have somebody ask a question, I always ask you to stand up. Forgive me for having not done that, because that's practice. If you're going to speak up, stand up. And then speak from a position of your role. When you're in a room, in a meeting, I stand up. I say, okay, everybody, I want to talk to you about this. You asked me a question. So think of it in terms of your own behavior. Thank you. I'm getting the hook. Bye.